Well, these are strong words from a writer on a Florida State news site. Is the ACC about to become the AAC?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On this episode, we'll talk about which ACC football team has the most pressure to perform on the field this coming season. There's a controversy now. They're not going to do it, and I don't really have a problem with it, but Clemson has become big news this week because they are refusing to play on Black Friday this coming season. Why? Nobody should really be surprised by their refusal, but Kenton Gibbs, by the way, he's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. I want to start with this, Kenton. Not every reporter, writer, blogger who covers the ACC was, all that happy about SMU, Cal, and Stanford entering the conference this week. So a writer from Chop Chat, which, as you can imagine, is a Florida State site, a writer from Chop, the Chop. He said this week at chopchat.com, this was by Kelvin Hunt. He says, these three schools add absolutely nothing to the conference. He said before saying, SMU is the only school with any sort of prayer to become competitive because they have some resources and they care about football, unlike the other two. The way these schools, especially SMU, make it seem like they've made the big time by leaving their former conference is hilarious. He says, I think most FSU fans hit the nail on the head by stating the ACC is about to become the AAC when FSU and Clemson depart. It's only a matter of time. So, Kenton, is the ACC about to go from Atlantic Coast Conference to American Athletic Conference?
Hold on, let me check my ears. Let me make sure both of my ears are good. I'm sorry. Let me check my headphones as well. Okay, so if I have this straight, okay, if I have this fully clear, what I'm hearing is the ACC will become the AAC, and that leaves me with one question here: what the hell is the Big 12? What are those guys?
It's the ACC with a better marketing firm is what it is. Because I'll admit that the Big 12, Brett Yormark, they do a good job making it seem like that's an important conference, but they literally just lost the only two football teams that really mattered over there in Oklahoma and Texas.
I get it. They did get some meaningful power players in Utah, who wants out, by the way.
Yeah,
but
they already want out.
And Colorado with all that they bring, whether or not they win, Deion Sanders is literally prime time. That's him. That's who he has been we have known him as prime time, Coach Brown, something along those lines for the last 40 years. Do you know how hard it is for a grown man, a 50-year-old who has children that are grown and have their own families to call himself prime and get away with it? It's extremely hard. But why am I saying that? I get it. They've added some meaningful players, but there are clearly levels. And the levels right now go as follows. You've got the Big Ten and SEC perched at the top of the mountain. Nobody's going to disagree about that. Donno and I are not delusional. We know they're the kings of the castle right now. And then below that, you have the tier with the Big 12 and the ACC. Now, they're clearly above the group of five. Clearly, I don't think that anybody would say, man, I'll tell you what, would you rather be in the middle of some action or in the ACC?
Do you want to hear the permanent members right now in the AAC? So you've got UAB, Alabama, Birmingham. You've got East Carolina.
Hold on. Didn't UAB not have a football program less than 5 years ago?
I think so.
What are we? Come on, man. Come on,
I can keep going.
Go ahead.
Florida Atlantic University, University of Memphis, University of North Carolina at Charlotte. You notice how geographically specific all these universities are. University of North Texas, Rice University, University of South Florida, Temple University, University of Texas, San Antonio, Tulane University, University of Tulsa, Wichita State. So there are a few programs in there that have done some things and are on the up and up. But I don't know, like, is it that bad, Kenton? Because obviously, because it's going to happen at some point when the ACC loses Clemson and Florida State, obviously the conference takes a huge hit. But come on, man, North Texas, San Antonio. I think we still got something on the AAC, don't we?
If I was to give people, just random folks off the street, if I was to walk around the city of Raleigh, or if Donno and I, when we were at ACC Media Days in Charlotte, were to poll every player and say, hey, by the way, please tell us, what is UTSA's mascot? We'll give you $10 if you can guess the mascot. How many people?
I have no idea. I would not be taking home $10. I don't know.
It's the Roadrunners. If we were to ask these guys, not bad at all. If we were to ask those same players, double or nothing. You put up nothing at all, but we'll double it for you. We'll give you $20 if you can tell us the city that FAU is located in.
I only know because it's like it's 60 miles from my house or something like that.
And I was about to say, how many of those guys that are not from Florida would say, oh, that's Boca Raton, obviously. We all know that. We all know. I get it, right? I understand that Florida State's leaving and all that, but this is that situation where you and somebody break up and then all of a sudden they start trashing everything about you. I never liked Donno's beard. I never liked his nose. I never liked his eyes. His hats are stupid. Let me tell you something. I hate everything about him. That Kenton guy, his beard is patchy. His headphones are too big. He's always yelling. I never liked him. I was with him for no reason. That's what's happening right now. Florida State's going through that phase of the breakup where they're like, you're fugly and we've always hated you. It's like, listen, we get it. You're leveling up. You leaving with the NBA ball player. We understand. We ain't mad at you. Baby, go do your thing. No need to trash me on the way out, which clearly Chop Chat is interested in doing.
So I would have, because I do want to add a serious point to this and to what the long-term future of the ACC would look like, because I've got a couple questions. And again, it's inevitable. At some point, Florida State and Clemson are going to leave. Like there's no turning back. Just the question is, when and how expensive will it be for them to leave? Those are the only two questions. It's going to happen. So my big wonder would be, once those two schools leave, does that open the floodgates for a bunch more, right? Do they set a precedent where, hey, UNC is reportedly wanted out? There's been some chatter about NC State. There's been a little chatter about Miami, Virginia. Like, does that lead to a mass exodus? Because yes, if the doomsday scenario were to play out, the ACC could essentially drop off of the Power Four. But we don't have any evidence that outside of a lot of rumors and talking points, we don't have any evidence that that's actually going to happen, at least not anytime soon. And then the other part of it is, once Florida State and Clemson leave, you would assume, because this is locked in for the foreseeable future with the new TV deal that ESPN signed with the college football playoff, for how long does the ACC have their automatic bid tie-in? Because honestly, that's the big thing, and the ACC and the Big 12 both have it, as do the SEC and the Big 10. That's one of the major things that separate the Power Four from the Group of Five, is the conference champion gets an automatic bid and one of those automatic top 5 seeds. So that to me, that's what separates the ACC, and they still have that for now. What separates them from the Group of Five?
Yeah, and so here's another thing that separates them from a Group of Five, because a lot of people said, well, Ken, what do you think the ACC is closer to? The Pac-12, when Oregon or I believe it was USC and UCLA were the first two, when USC and UCLA left, or the Big 12 with Texas and Oklahoma leaving? And I'd say the latter, not the former, because the reality of the situation is this: the grant of rights still exists. And because these new teams have been added in, the grant of rights is not going to dissolve overnight. And by the way, I know everybody keeps screaming, ESPN has the right to terminate the contract. ESPN has the ACC raked over the coals.
Yeah.
I am trying to tell y'all, everybody that I've talked to, even from outside of the ACC, has said ESPN is making money in a way with this deal it would not make any fiscal sense.
And the ACC network, it's very profitable, right? If they don't spend a whole lot on the personalities on that network, I don't think. And there's actually some decent content there. and they do well. They do better than you think, the ACC network.
Pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense for ESPN to cut them. I'm sorry to tell y'all. I know that it feels good to say. And again, this is what I mean by Florida State sounding like that angry ex, because they start talking about stuff that doesn't even make sense anymore. You know what I mean? Like, well, you got a new car, but your first car was stupid. And it's like, okay, yeah, I paid $500 cash for that car. Yeah, it wasn't supposed to be a great car. It got me from point A to point B, babe. So I don't know what you want from me. The reality of this thing is simple. The deal is in a way that ESPN has no reason to cut the ACC. And if ESPN has no reason to cut the ACC, the grant of rights is still in place for everybody else. And here's the last thing I'll say about this, which I've said plenty of times, and I'm going to have to say plenty more because folks don't listen. Folks think that I'm off the brown all the time, apparently, even though I had it for one episode. They must think that I'm constantly drinking like a fish or something. The reality of the deal is this simple. Even if Clemson and Florida State have to pay about $150, $200 in total, and they're clean, scot-free, how many programs have $150 to pay and not or $150 and a new landing spot? Who has it?
That's true. That's a great point. Right, because they're not. But believe me, I think one of the reasons why things aren't further along with Miami is they don't. At least this is just my what I get from the info that we get. I don't think that they have a guaranteed landing spot, and I think there's most of the other teams in the ACC are in the same boat. Now maybe Clemson has one of those guaranteed landing spots, and Clemson, they're not cooperating with the conference right now, and I can understand why. We have so much still to talk about. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And I'm only getting started with the Game Time app. Guys, this is the only ticket app that I use, and I don't stress over buying last-minute tickets to sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, because the deals on Game Time actually get better the closer you get to the event. I can buy tickets to the Copa America final, which is coming up down in South Florida where I live in a couple of weeks. I can buy tickets day of, and I'm going to get a better deal day of at Game Time than I would get buying them 2 weeks out. It really is magic, my friends. And got Major League Baseball going on. There's games happening all over the place. Folks, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute on the Game Time app. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. You get a panoramic view from your seat, which is a game changer. It's right there in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what you're going to be seeing from your angle in the stadium or in the arena. And if you find tickets for the same for less in the same section and row somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's the lowest price guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes, Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. So Kenton, this has made news over the last couple of days. So this is from tigernet.com. This is widely reported, though, of course. Clemson University refused a request by the ACC and ESPN to move this year's home game against South Carolina to the Friday night after Thanksgiving, which is Black Friday. Court documents obtained by TigerNet pertaining to the school's lawsuit against the conference in its efforts to break the grant of rights revealed that the conference and ESPN made the request. The conference asked Clemson to move the game scheduled for Saturday, November 30th to a Friday night primetime game on ESPN. So here's a bit of, and we'll talk about the concessions that ESPN was going to make to Clemson to request them to move that game, which they have refused to do. But here is a portion of an email from the ACC to Clemson Athletic Director Graham Neff. Michael Strickland, the Senior Associate Commissioner for Football, wrote, this is the email that he wrote, quote, "As has been indicated by you during this process, the conference office is disappointed in Clemson University's lack of cooperation on this matter. As all ACC members know, it is incumbent upon the ACC and its institutions to work in good faith with ESPN on football scheduling issues. This cooperation maximizes the value of our relationship with our media partner and strengthens our collective future. Clemson's decision not to do so in this instance is harmful toward that goal. With regards, Michael Strickland. Now, first thing that pops into my head, Kenton, when I became aware of the story, why would I be surprised that a university that is trying to get out of that very conference is engaged in multiple lawsuits with that very conference? Are you really surprised that they're not going to inconvenience themselves to do a favor for said conference that they're suing? Nobody should be surprised by this.
You're mid-divorce and asking your wife to move the car so you can leave, and she's in the middle of a meeting. It's not going to work out well for you, buddy.
No.
Not going to work out well. You're going to get immediately hit with the poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. I'm going to finish this meeting. Because that's where you're at right now, right? Like, objectively speaking, yes, it would have been nice of Clemson to do this. Yes, it would have been, this is the conference lead thing to do. They want to be out. They want to be out. They're going to do everything they can to say, hey, this is how we do things. We're not leaving, period. Now, the interesting thing about this is knowing Dabo and how he is, I still think this might have been a problem, even if Clemson weren't leaving the conference. It's just exacerbated by the fact that they are. Like, right. The one thing that you have to give Dabo on some level, when it comes to family and all that, he is principled. He is principled. In other ways, I remember a certain coach saying that he quit if players start getting paid. But in the way of family, in the way that he treats his players, in the way that, hey, family is important in all things that we do, that is one thing that you can say has consistently been a part of the heartbeat of Clemson.
Yeah, because something that I've been told today from Clemson circles is that big reason why they refuse to move that game to Black Friday is that Dabo always wants to allow his coaches and I'm sure his players to be home for Thanksgiving. And apparently playing that game would make that more difficult or an inconvenience on the Thanksgiving weekend. So from that, I can respect it. And you might be right. This might have been something that Dabo would have demanded whether or not you're suing the conference, right? Yeah. And it's also, it's a little bit laughable here. So these are the concessions that ESPN agreed to for Clemson's future scheduling. This is like how they were going to sweeten the pot. It's like, hey, if you agree to move that game from Saturday to Friday, this is what we're going to offer you to sweeten that deal. Like most of this stuff, they probably laughed at this. So the league and ESPN agreed to the following concessions. Their November 23rd game versus the Citadel would be scheduled at noon. That would be so they would have more time before the Friday night game. You get it out of the way early the previous Saturday. Confirmed primetime game for that Friday, November 29th game that they refused to play. Agreement to switch the scheduled 2027 Labor Day Monday conference game featuring Clemson at NC State to a Clemson home ACC game. Now, Clemson is thinking, are we still going to be here in 2027? Who cares? Like, we're going to be. They would imagine they're out by then. They would have a limit of 2 road ACC games in 2024 played in primetime. Number 5, agreement that the University of South Carolina would reciprocate with hosting a future Clemson versus South Carolina game on Black Friday. I don't know how reciprocating that would sweeten the deal for Clemson. The league said that despite having secured these concessions and despite other ACC teams having agreed to play on Black Friday in previous instances, like Georgia Tech versus Georgia, Florida State versus Florida, UNC versus Notre Dame, Virginia versus Virginia. There's a whole bunch of examples. Clemson declined to move the game. So, and I've got another thought that came up with this, Kenton. And again, this all may be negated. This all may be negated by what you said about Dabo. This might have just been a Dabo decision, and there's no grand big picture here. But if there is a grand big picture on this, Clemson maybe wouldn't mind not only pissing off the ACC, who they're suing and is suing them, but they also might not mind pissing off ESPN, because if they've got a bid to the Big Ten, as has been widely reported and speculated, that would be Fox, right? So Clemson might be thinking, who cares if we piss off ESPN when within the next couple of years, they're not going to be our TV partner anymore. Fox is going to be our TV partner. So that's another thought that crossed my mind.
I'm going to tell you, that's bad ball. You never want to do wrong by anybody because the same people you see on the way up are the same folks you're going to see on the way down. And if you don't make that concession today, it's an easy situation. And I'm going to say this, and a lot of people might not like it. Dabo is going to be your coach, period. He's going to be your guy. Dabo is not going to use the portal, or at least not as effectively as other coaches. He doesn't have a hankering for it, doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
That means you've hit a ceiling as a program. Now, Donno, what happens after you reach the peak of a mountain? What's on the other side of it?
A downward slope.
A descent. Yes, downward slope. As this team goes on their downward slope on down the mountain, do they not think things could be different in 10 years? Do they not think, or do they have this thing in their mind that Clemson fans are so ravenous that, hey, even if we are perennially 6-6, they'll still love us? Do they think
Tyler
that?
from Spartanburg, baby. He'll still love you.
He'll still love you. He'll still love you. The rest of Spartanburg might not. You know what? Let's say you keep Spartanburg. You keep all of South Carolina. Those little fans that trickled on into Georgia, those fans that, you got some Clemson folk in North Carolina, that might ease up when you become perennially, because mind you, and I know what people are thinking, perennially 6-6, they're a 10-win team every year. We just admitted they're moving to a more difficult conference. Donno and I can both say
That's
that.
true.
You're moving to a more difficult conference while refusing to utilize one of the tools in your playbook to get new players. And you think that irrelevance is impossible. Again, careful what you wish for. Even if you decline it, even if you say, hey, I'm not going to do this because we're a family first team, do that. Don't do it disrespectfully. Don't do it with I'll give you a finger on the way out the door because I don't like you. Okay. All right. Try it if you want to. And you may find out that, hey, this did more damage than you could imagine.
That's well said. And maybe Clemson might be the answer to this question, but I want to talk about football teams in the ACC that have the most pressure to perform. And pressure, it can come from a number of different things. Expectations, high expectations are certainly one of those things that create pressure. So where does Clemson fall in this conversation? Florida State, Miami, and are there any other teams that have big-time pressure this year? You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Guys, we absolutely love this Locked On network. Now, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you every day, bringing you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So I'm thinking Kenton, Clemson, I'm getting ahead of myself, Freudian slip. ACC football teams that have a lot of pressure to perform this year. We've got to throw Clemson into that mix, right? I mean, you talked about the perennial double-digit win team. They're currently, they got one foot out the door of the ACC right now. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on Clemson. Florida State, same thing. We'll get to them. There's going to be a lot of eyes on Clemson this year, but there's also eyes on Clemson for different reasons because Dabo Swinney is going so against the grain with his philosophy. Transfer portal, no transfer portal. I know Clemson does use NIL. Anytime we've kind of dismissed that, the Clemson fans are all over us. We have NIL and all, but Dabo does not. He doesn't embrace it in a way that other programs around college football do. So they run things differently there, and I think that creates a lot of pressure to win, especially for a coach who, obviously you build equity when you win 2 national championships with that program, but you also create expectations to stay at that sort of a level. And if they don't, there is pressure for them to win double-digit games and win the ACC this year.
Here's the problem with this idea, because Donno, I hate to say it. But I'm going to get to it at the end here. You know what eases pressure a lot? Trophies. Trophies is a pressure release valve. Clemson's got a ton of them. So what do I mean by that? Is there pressure per se? Like, yes, there are expectations, 10 wins, New Year's Six Bowl, playoff bid. Yes, but no. And I know what some people are thinking. No pressure on Clemson? What? Here's the thing. The fans can act like they'll revolt if they win 10 games again and don't go to the ACC championship game again this year. But what were you before Dabo? What were you? Let's not play around and act like Clemson has been perched at the top of the mountain for 40 years straight. That's not you.
True.
That's not you. That, with all due respect, you don't have, in Alabama, for example, yes, there is a lot of time between Saban and Bear Bryant, but you could pretend like we got the first greatest and second greatest coach of all time. That's your expectation, Kalen DeBoer. You can do that because you got, other than Dabo, please, I challenge you. Name me one Clemson football coach that you know for a fact is in the College Football Hall of Fame.
Oh, in the Hall of Fame? God, no, I can't. Is there anyone else?
There might be, but that's my point exactly. They don't have that type of expectation. Florida State, similar situation. Even if Norvell and them laid egg this year, who cares? They were undefeated last year, supposed to be a playoff team. Hey, I mean, not the worst thing in the world. There's only one team that trophy case is looking a little light.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to tell you something. Mario Cristobal, come on down, brother. Miami University. Damian Martinez, come on down, brother. Cam Ward, bring it. Xavier X Restrepo. The pressure is on you all because if you don't at least come close to adding hardware to your trophy case this year, I think that they are much closer to heads rolling than any other, mid-level or above team in the conference right now. I really do. I think that if Miami has a what's the bed this year, somebody's gone. And by somebody, I mean the head coach. All these other teams that we're talking about, for the most part, you may see some turnover on the staff, get rid of this guy, move this around here. You're not seeing anybody under the same type of pressure Miami is under this year.
Now, I agree with you for the most part. I just want to be clear on one thing. There are a lot of trophies in that case, just not in the last.
Mario ain't bought them. That's what I'm saying. Mario ain't bought them. That's the problem. That's the problem. With these other schools,
he did win. He won 2 natties as a player. He hasn't won them as a coach. But and listen, and to your point, you make a great point because when we talk about building equity, recent success, Clemson, they've got 2 national championships within the past decade. Florida State coming off a magnificent season, even if they didn't make it to the playoffs. We both thought they should have. I don't think they would have won it, but they should have at least gotten in. I believe they deserve to get in. So Mike Norvell bought himself a certain amount of equity, whereas Miami, and I'm well aware of this, has underachieved for a long time, right? Even in the years I didn't expect them to be very good, I usually expected them to be better than the results they produced on the field. Like the year that they went 5-7, I didn't think they were going to win 10 games that year, but I thought they'd win more than 5. I thought they'd win more than 7 last year. So I totally get it, right? You create for a team that has underperformed, and they've underperformed long before Mario Cristobal got there.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely,
they've underperformed for the last 20 years, for the better part of those last 20 years. And you have expectations. Like I was interviewing he's not a Miami fan. I interviewed Dalton Wasserman, who's a Pro Football Focus analyst, last week on Locked On Canes. And, he didn't outright pick Miami to win the ACC, but he did say they're the most talented team in the ACC and most balanced team in his eyes. So with that sort of a roster, expectations come with that. And Cristobal doesn't have the recent equity that Mike Norvell has after last year and the last couple of years. And what Dabo Swinney has for his tenure at Clemson. So I would agree with you, and I like your logic. I like where you took it, that, Miami is probably the team within the ACC that has the most pressure this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I'm fully on board for when you win a trophy of any sort, and besides a bowl game, I mean something real. Like you've got to win a conference championship, you've got to get to the playoff. That's a pressure release valve. It doesn't matter what you think about Cristobal. Cristobal could lose a game in the exact same way he lost Georgia Tech this last year. If they go to the playoff, guess what happens? it's like a Beyonce concert where she say, everybody on mute. You're going to shut up. You're going to shut up real quick because he shut you up. But again, he doesn't have it. Dabo can be who he is only because he's won in the way that he has in the past. If Dabo was a brand new coach talking about, oh, we're not using the transfer portal at all, people would be saying, my brother in Christ, don't you dare. Don't you dare come in here with no 8-win. Don't you dare. Norvell, different case altogether. Being at Florida State naturally comes with some pressure because, again, Bowden, Jimbo, all the things with that. I get it. But I don't think he's doing anything as egregious as the other two where it's like, all right, now, you can't do that and do less than a natty or do less than an undefeated season to get away with it. So,
yeah no. That is well said. Well, I want to wish everybody, for a lot of you, maybe you're watching this on the 4th of July. I wish you a happy Independence Day, and be careful with those home fireworks because it's like I grew up setting those off in the front yard, Kenton. My wife, who has worked in an emergency room for the last 15 years, will not allow us to set off home fireworks because 4th of July tends to be the busiest day of the year in the emergency room for reasons you can imagine. So she kind of took that work home with her and said, we're going to go watch some fireworks. There's a couple different, parks and stuff in Miami that set off fire. She will not allow us to do the fireworks in the front yard because she thinks I'm going to show up at the ER with 2 fingers. So we're not going to be doing that.
I know that Miami and USF are 2 different schools, but let the South Florida grad, Jason Pierre-Paul, teach us all a lesson. If you're going to do it, do it safely, do it carefully, leave it to the professionals, or at least follow the advice. But with that being said, hey, we're Americans. What's a kilometer? Celebrate your freedom, baby. Go do it.
Let's do it. Great stuff as always. Kenton Gibbs. I'm Alex Donno. We'll talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.